Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. In this video, I'm going to be looking at the weekend of June the 8th and 9th, 2024. And perhaps the big event this weekend is Mars moving into Taurus. So that is a big sign change. Mars in Aries, the sign of its rulership, moving into Taurus, the sign of its detriment. So on the face of it, we see a big weakening of Mars as it moves from a sign in which it's very strong into a sign in which it is very weak. And I'm going to be looking at Mars in Taurus and what it means. And specifically, I'm going to be looking at various people who have got Mars in Taurus. I have got Mars in Taurus. That puts me in a kind of a good position because sometimes when I talk about a somewhat negative, all things being equal, configuration astrologically, people might think that I'm being prejudiced and something like that. So, I think that happened a little bit when I talked about Venus going into Aries. I was a bit negative about Venus going into Aries. I think I got a bit of few complaints in the comments section. But if I'm negative about Mars in Taurus, just remember I've got Mars in Taurus, so I'm being negative about myself. And I suppose I'm entitled to be a little bit negative about myself if I want to be. But before I look at Mars in Taurus, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for this weekend, which is the weekend of June the 8th and 9th, 2024. So what we have here, as always, is the chart of the weekend. It's a chart set for the middle of the weekend. In other words, midnight on June the 9th. And we can see that midnight June the 9th, set for New York, the moon is in Cancer. So for most of the weekend, the moon is moving through Cancer. And the moon is well placed in Cancer. It's in its own sign. And I think that there's going to be a sense of emotional comfort. We feel that we are in the right place, that our emotions are on relatively good form. And it's a nice balance because we've got these 4 planets in Gemini, Jupiter, Mercury, Sun and Venus. And, we did have the moon in Gemini as well up until Friday, but or Saturday, I think it was by the end of Friday, the moon was in pretty much Gemini everywhere, regardless of your time zone. But with the moon in Cancer, it provides a balance to all that Gemini energy. It provides a place where we can do a bit of reflecting and feeling. And we don't always have to talk. That can be the problem with Gemini, just a lot of talking. Now, aside from the moon moving into Cancer, and I should point out that the moon on Sunday does move into Leo. It moves into Leo at around 8:30 in the afternoon, 8:30 in the evening, London time. So if you're in Europe, you'll get a blast of moon in Leo right at the end of the day, and I suppose in Africa as well. But it's going to be very brief, and so probably if you're outside the Americas, you should regard the whole weekend as just being moon in Cancer. If you are in the Americas, well, on Sunday afternoon, the moon does move into Leo, so there may be a certain change of emphasis in the Americas as you move from Cancer to Leo. Perhaps not so much focus on feelings, more focus on yourself, and being Leo, wanting attention, and a sense of judging the world in a different way, moving from an emotional way of judging the world into a gut feeling way, with sort of gut feeling is just, it's not about emotion. A gut feeling is really about intuition. I just know this is the right way. I know this is the answer. So that could be a way in which a moon in Leo works. But just looking at the weekend in general, I do think it is a moon in Cancer affair. Now, as far as specifics are concerned, we have this Sun-Venus conjunction, and this Sun-Venus conjunction it's separating. It's not as bad as it was, and I say not as bad as it was because I think that this Sun-Venus conjunction has not been useful. And I've been looking at my own experience, I've been looking at people's comments, and I don't think people have been having a great time with Sun conjunct Venus. Things just haven't worked. And there might have been issues with other people, with how we relate to other people. Just something seems to have been blocked or perhaps blinded, because that can be a certain sense of not being able to see because the sun is too strong. And where I am, blue sky. I'm just looking at blue sky, and it's light. I can't see any clouds. That's great, but when the sun comes along, it can be blinding. And now the Sun and Venus they are separating. Now that sounds good, but this weekend both the Sun and Venus are square Saturn. Venus squares Saturn on Saturday. Sun squares Saturn on Sunday. So with Sun and Venus both squaring Saturn, that is a bit of a problem. And we might still find that we are blocked, or at least that things are difficult, hard work, and we may not be able to get through to people. And with Venus square Saturn, that can actually be quite unpleasant. It's not great for happy, loving relationships, for example. Venus square Saturn can be about focusing a little too much on the details. In a way, Venus square Saturn can be a little like Venus in Virgo. No offense to anyone who's got Venus in Virgo, but Venus in Virgo, the Venus is in its fall in Virgo. It's a bit like that. But with Venus square Saturn, it's about thinking about the cost of things, thinking about material considerations at the expense of emotional ones. And then with Sun square Saturn, there is a sense in which things are blocked and we can't really express ourselves in the way we'd like. But I suppose the plus side of Sun square Saturn, Venus square Saturn, is about focus and discipline. We can just discard irrelevant detail, irrelevant emotional detail that gets in the way, and we can just focus on the things that really matter. Aside from that, we've got Mars is making a semi-sextile to Neptune. So Mars is on the verge of leaving Aries. And Neptune is right at the end of Pisces. So Mars and Neptune are in a semi-sextile aspect. Now, a semi-sextile, which is 30 degrees, in general, it's not a fortunate aspect, because semi-sextiles are about two signs that are right next to each other. Neptune in Pisces, Mars in Aries. So there's Mars in Aries. It's trying to get things done. And then it has to deal with Neptune. How can Mars get stuff done when it has to deal with Neptune? It's really difficult. So if you're trying to get stuff done, you can't just do the first thing that comes into your head. You've got to listen to your feelings. And you've got to listen to your feelings and be aware of some of the complications around you, because I think there are complications, emotional complications. And at the same time, things might just not go to plan. And you have to make an allowance for the kind of confusion that other people can inflict upon you. Then on Sunday, we have a minor aspect, supposedly, Mercury quintile Neptune. So Mercury quintile Neptune, remember the quintile 72 degrees apart, and 72 degrees is 1/5 of the circle. So it's about what we're trying to create. And Mercury quintile Neptune is quite sensitive, and we are trying to perhaps be a little bit spiritual in the way we're thinking. But it's hard work. I mean, I won't say it's hard work, but it's not easy. It's not natural. But we have perhaps an inspiration. That's Neptune. We feel something. We feel something about our world, maybe the world out there around us, maybe the cosmos. We just feel something. That's the Neptune. And Mercury quintile Neptune is about wanting to actually make it happen. We're trying to manifest what we feel inside ourselves. And we can do it, but it requires a little bit of effort. So if you have, I don't know, let's say you've had a dream and you want to talk about your dream, then it's something you can do. Mercury quintile Neptune. And it won't be entirely easy. You may have to almost change a few things so that you can express it. Because the raw dream, the raw feeling is not, you can't possibly express it. So you have to create the right style in which you can get that image across. And there's one final thing. Well, there are loads of, I'm sure there are loads of other things that I've just missed, but key thing, Sunday, Mars moves into Taurus. That is a big sign change, as I said at the beginning of this video. Mars was in Aries. Mars was in its own sign in Aries. Now it's moving into Taurus. Taurus is in its detriment in this sign. And so it's a big change because Mars moves from being in a very strong sign to being in a very weak sign. And it just happens. Remember, there's no cusp. It just happens instantaneously. So, in fact, when that happens is, just to tell you precisely when it happens on Sunday at 5:35 in the morning, London time. So, if you're in California, it would be late on Saturday. If you're in Australia, it would be, I don't know, late afternoon, early evening, or New Zealand, that kind of time. But wherever you are, Mars does move into Taurus. And yeah, it is a big change. And it may not be as easy to get things done as it used to be. But I suppose on the plus side, people are going to be less impulsive and more considered, but also more stubborn, because Mars in Taurus is very stubborn. But I will be talking about Mars in Taurus in detail later in the video. So let me now turn to the heliocentric picture. There's not a huge amount going on heliocentrically. There it is. We still have this Earth-Venus opposition. I think that Earth-Venus opposition does represent certain uncomfortableness with certain other people. It's not entirely natural. And we also need to consider the fact that Venus is slowly moving to the square of Mars and Saturn. That won't happen for a bit of time, but perhaps we need to be aware of it. Let me get that right. So let me rephrase that. Venus is slowly moving to a square of Mars and Neptune. Venus has already made its heliocentric square to Saturn, but Venus is starting to make a square to Mars and Neptune, and indeed Mars is making a conjunction to Neptune. So we're probably starting to feel that a bit. a little bit of uncertainty creeping in. Venus square Mars is about attraction and about how we present ourselves and how we're charismatic, how we can be charismatic. But it's a bit uneasy, and things aren't helped by the fact that Mars is starting to make that conjunction with Neptune. Mars conjunct Neptune, okay, it's not exact this weekend. It's sort of Monday, Tuesday, but it becomes exact. But Mars conjunct Neptune can be about water damage. It can be about being devious. So that is all very possible. But I don't think we should worry about it too much. I think at the moment, right now, there isn't actually a huge amount going on. One final thing I should say though, well, one thing that actually is exact is there is Earth, and Earth is starting to it's starting to move towards the opposition of Venus. So it's not particularly exact. I mean, what I'm really saying is that there's not much going on heliocentrically. And so I'll talk more about the heliocentric picture on Monday, I think that things will be a lot clearer. But anyway, sorry, I was completely confused about the heliocentric picture. That was not a great analysis of the heliocentric universe. So that's a good time to move on to something else. And of course, what I'll be moving on to now is my forecasts for the 12 signs for the weekend, which is the weekend of June the 8th and 9th, 2024. So let's move to the geocentric picture. And so these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for this weekend. Aries. A big change is happening. Mars is your ruler, and it's changing sign from Aries to Taurus. Now, on the face of it, this is not good news, because Mars has been in Aries for the last 6 weeks. Mars rules Aries. So with Mars moving through Aries, you have been in a strong position. You have been able to assert yourself, and you're now moving into a situation where Mars will be in its detriment. Mars doesn't work very well in Taurus. Things could become much slower, and you might feel that the material world is just slowing you down. I mean, Aries is a sign which likes action, wants things to happen quickly. Let's do it now. But then Mars in Taurus, the world is just full of obstacles, and that might sound, not great. But I think there is a plus side to it, and it's the fact that there is less pressure on you. With Mars in Aries, it was always you who were supposed to get things done, and you felt a responsibility there because, not just because Mars is in Aries in general, but also because the North Node is in Aries. So with Mars in the same sign as the North Node, that was what you were supposed to be doing. That was the pressure to, yes, make things happen. And, other people were perhaps looking to you for leadership. But now the pressure is, to an extent, going. You can slow down a bit. Yeah, it's okay to slow down. I think you actually need to slow down a bit. You can start to organize your life and perhaps get rid of things that you don't need to worry about anymore. It may actually be a time for goodbyes. I think I was saying that when I was talking about what was going on in your life on Friday. You don't have to be involved in everything. And you may now recognize that some things you're involved in are just not really worth the effort. They're not giving you everything you need, and perhaps you can just distance yourself from them, and that should be fine. Further, the moon is in Cancer, and with the moon in Cancer, the focus is on your space, it's on your home, it's where you feel comfortable. And you're not going to feel comfortable if you're zooming around trying to make things happen. No, you don't have to do that anymore. You can be more relaxed, and the pressure is definitely off. And maybe you can let other people do some of the work. I think that there are people who have clear ideas about the way things should be done. And they're not afraid of talking about them, telling it as it is, or at least as it is in terms of how they see it. And let them take responsibility. You don't have to be there all the time. So overall, I would just say, relax, calm down, and the spotlight is moving away from you, and that is probably a good thing. Taurus, you probably know by now that Mars is on the brink of moving into your sign, and it's a bit of a mixed blessing. Mars is quite an angry, assertive planet, and so if Mars is in Taurus, there could be things that you get annoyed about. Mars is in Taurus for the next 6 weeks or so. Sorry, I should have told you when it leaves Taurus. Mars is in. Yeah, it's in Taurus until July the 20th. So that's a chunk of time. And so with Mars moving into Taurus, you're going to feel that there are things that you need to do, and you're going to want to do them. And you are going to become, I think, a lot more stubborn than usual. Now, I know that Taurians tend to be a bit stubborn. And with Mars moving into Taurus, you're going to be perhaps even more stubborn than usual. And it's just important that you don't get annoyed. Taurians can get annoyed when things don't work the way they want them to work, because Taurians can have a kind of fixed view of the world. Yeah, but I have Taurus rising, so I mean, I'm not talking about anything I can't deal with myself. But Taurians can have a fixed view of the world, and if things don't go exactly right, they can get annoyed. At the same time, once you get it in your head that something needs to be done, you go and do it, and for better or for worse. And this is something I will be discussing when I look at various famous people who have Mars in Taurus. And so it could be that as Mars moves into Taurus, you suddenly get it into your head that something has to happen and that there's something you must do, and you're not prepared to compromise. You're not even prepared to talk about it, perhaps. It's not something that you're going to tell everyone about. It's just, I'm going to do it. And okay, what is it that you want to do? Is it constructive? Is it going to be useful? If it is useful, then maybe you need to give yourself a time limit by July the 20th, because that's how long Mars is going to be in Taurus for. But don't be too stubborn. It just may be that you decide to do something that is not helpful. It may actually be quite destructive. And I'm afraid in certain cases, Mars in Taurus can be quite vindictive. And, I mean, I think many Taurians do have a vindictive streak. And, you know, it's like remembering something for a very long time, just holding on to it. Okay, Cancers can do that as well, but Taurus can do it to an extent. And so you just hold on to something and you say, no, this is your chance to get back at someone. That's, I don't think, very helpful. Now, that's the broad picture with Mars moving into Taurus. In fact, Mars doesn't actually move into Taurus until Sunday. So you could say, well, on Saturday, on Saturday you're still waiting for this sign change. So what, in fact, you have on Saturday is you have Venus square Saturn. And Venus square Saturn is, I suppose, it's not really a bundle of laughs. You've got Venus is in not great shape, because Venus, we know that Venus is conjunct the Sun. It's separating from that conjunction from the Sun, but it's now square Saturn. So I think on Saturday you may feel a certain amount of pressure, and you may be aware of all the reasons why you can't do what you want to do. For example, you may be aware of financial restrictions. The things you'd like to do, but you haven't got the money in order to, pay for it. And at the same time, you may feel that other people are not being forthcoming, are not being useful. That's Venus square Saturn. But if there are issues in terms of relationships, and I think there could be issues in terms of relationships may not be giving you everything you want. It may be because of you rather than the other person. That's because Venus is square Saturn. Something is like holding you back. It may be something emotional. You're not giving everything. You're just perhaps keeping something secret. Or you're being just stubborn about one particular thing. And so in terms of relationships, if you want any relationship to work, you must make sure that you have reasonable expectations, and also that your own actions and reactions are not in some way responsible. Maybe you're just bothered about something and you can't let go of it, and it's feeding into everything else, and it may be making it difficult for you to relate to other people. But I do think there's a certain sense of choice there. If you make the effort to be constructive, then I think that in the end you can get over this hurdle. So, okay, that's it. It's not I don't think it's a great weekend, I have to say. I just think there's too much going on, and I think overall you're probably going to be a little too focused on yourself, but I do think you're able to get your message across. Your message may come over in a slightly rough way, perhaps a little bit crude and not especially well crafted, but people will get the message, and I think that is the main thing. Gemini. Actually, Gemini, you're trying to be positive. I think that's very important. I suppose you've got these 4 planets in your sign. Okay, the moon might have moved out of Gemini, but there's still a lot of stuff in Gemini, and you are trying to be positive. You're trying to demonstrate to everyone that things are okay. And I think in many cases you do have a lot to say, and the things you say will be enthusiastic, and you're going to be able to get people to take you seriously. And once you've got their attention, you can really demonstrate to them that things really are okay. And the reason for this is it's to do with Mercury, which is your ruler, and Mercury is conjunct the Venus-Jupiter midpoint. So the Venus-Jupiter midpoint is about being happy. It's about being optimistic. It's about really a good luck as well. So there's a certain amount of luck there. And this is all something that you can present. So if you feel that the world is a little bit grim, that other people are also being grim and are perhaps having a negative view, I think you can get people to cheer up. And I think your words are going to have a big impact, and people will listen, and I think that you can make a big difference. So if you see that other people are feeling sorry for themselves, or indeed that groups of people are feeling sorry for themselves, your intervention can actually be crucial. And at the same time, Mercury is making a quintile to Neptune, and you are trying very hard to see beyond the immediate material universe. You're trying to tune into something that is larger than yourself, and I think this is actually part of your message. So from a, psychic, supernatural, cosmic point of view, you're probably more finely tuned than usual, and you're trying hard. So if you want to understand the cosmos, if you want to gain a sort of a spiritual insight into what's going on around you, I think you can. It might require a little bit of effort, the kind of effort that requires you maybe to just separate yourself for a little. You need a little bit of separation just so that you can understand what's going on out there in the universe. And I think that your insights will be powerful, and your insights may help inform you when you are trying to cheer everyone up. I mean, if you feel you do have to cheer everyone up, and maybe what you need to do is you need to give people a perspective. People can be very focused on their own little problems, and they might not get any perspective on it. And perhaps you can persuade people that it's a big world out there, that they don't have to concentrate on their own issues. When they start to look at the big world and what's happening, not tomorrow, but perhaps what's happening next year or in 10 years' time, they might start to relax. So I think, Gemini, this weekend, you are very much a force for good. Though I don't want to give the impression that you're just a hermit. Sorry, not hermit, that's the wrong word. Divine holy man, is that what I meant? Or divine holy woman, holy person. That's not the whole picture. There is a material edge this weekend. In fact, with most Geminis, there's always a material edge. It's not apparent, but Geminis are working at different levels, and they're always thinking about what might go wrong, because Geminis have an active mind. And this weekend, the Sun and Venus are making a square to Saturn. And that square, in some ways, is difficult. I think most other people are going to find it difficult. I don't think you're going to find it difficult. I think you're going to find it very natural. And Geminis who are materialistic, who have an agenda, and let's face it, many Geminis do, even if they sound very detached and spiritual, there's still an agenda there, because Geminis can work in two different ways. The spiritual, the materialistic, that's two sides of the Gemini. And if you're involved in anything relating to money and business, you are actually going to be very focused. And I know I'm going to contradict myself here, but there's going to be a brutality to it if it's necessary. You are able to make hard decisions, and from a point of view of your own selfish interests, you can really cover a lot of ground, and you can set things up very nicely for the future. And it's just about your focus. your perhaps ruthless focus. And you know what's needed, you know what's required, you know what has to happen this weekend, and you will just do it. And you won't allow human and social considerations to get in your way. See, I've contradicted myself. You see, I'm a Gemini. I can contradict myself. So there is a time for being selfless this weekend. And there is a time for being utterly selfish. And you have to get the balance right. Cancer. The moon is in your sign. It's going to be in your sign pretty much all weekend, though if you're in the Americas, it does move into Leo on Sunday afternoon. So it does depend a little bit on where you are, but by and large, with the moon in Cancer, I think that you're quite grounded. And you understand what's happening. I don't think there's going to be a great deal of drama. You can just tune into the world, tune into other people. But I suppose I have to say that the moon in Cancer is making a square to Chiron. And with that square to Chiron, you might feel that something is wrong, possibly not with you, but with someone else, or it could be if you're engaged in an organization, you might be aware that an organization you're involved with has something wrong with it. It has, I suppose, if one wants to be literal, it has some kind of wound and something that needs to be healed. So that doesn't actually mean that you have to be involved with this organization over the weekend directly. It's more about what you're thinking. So when you think about all the things you're involved with, it just may just occur to you that something is wrong with something that you are involved with. And you may be thinking about how best you can deal with the situation, and what you should be saying and what you should be doing. So that happens perhaps when you're alone and when you're reflecting with your emotions. And the moon, while it's moving through Cancer, it does make a trine to Saturn. And this trine between Moon and Saturn, I think, should be quite favourable at a number of levels. I think it's good for relationships. After all, the moon is in Cancer, it's in your sign, and Saturn is ruler of Capricorn, which is your opposite sign, and Capricorn has a great connection with relationships in the Cancerian horoscope. So Moon trine Saturn may indicate that certain relationships, the important relationships, can flow very well, maybe against the odds, because in terms of relationships in general, not just about your sign, Venus is square Saturn. And Venus square Saturn is just not good for getting close to people. There are always hurdles, there are always boundaries, and it may be difficult to get past these annoying material details. But with Moon trine Saturn, I think that Cancerians can find a way through. So even if it's difficult to get through to people, with a bit of effort and just using your Cancerian intuition, I think you can find a way through. And you may find that some of the people you're interacting with have a view of a world which is perhaps slightly different from your own, but one in which it can be quite informing and maybe something you actually want to imitate. You listen to what someone thinks and feels, and what their philosophy is, their spirituality. You listen to someone, you get an idea about who they are, and As a result, you start to reflect on yourself and you think, okay, well, maybe a few changes are in order. Now, if you are in the Americas, then on Sunday afternoon, the moon, which is your ruler, does change sign. It moves into Leo. And there is going to be a different focus there. With moon moving into Leo, you could, during the last part of Sunday, start to be more focused on yourself and what's important to you, and you may feel that you have to focus on things that might be preventing you from realizing your selfhood. And like it or not, one thing could be money. With moon moving into Leo, from a Cancerian perspective, Leo does have the connection with money. And so American Cancerians late on Sunday might start to think about money and think, hold on, something needs to change. And perhaps you've been taken for granted, or that you haven't been taken seriously enough, and that you may start to resolve to address the issue sooner rather than later. If not on Sunday, then perhaps on Monday. And of course, if you're not in the Americas, moon, well, if you're in Europe, moon moves into Leo on Sunday evening. If you're in Asia, Australasia, it will move into Leo on Monday, and of course I'll be talking about that then. So that's the weekend for Cancerians. It doesn't, to my mind, look too bad, and also it doesn't look too exciting, and that is probably a good thing. There is a limit to how much excitement we can all handle. So I think it looks like being an okay weekend for you, Cancer. Leo, you are holding something back, I think. You just feel that you can't entirely be yourself. Maybe, Leo, you just take the view that other people just are not interested, or that you're just not ready. And I think that is a reasonable approach. I don't think that there's any immediate pressure to do anything. And, with the moon going through Cancer, remember, moon is going through Cancer all of Saturday, and it only goes into Leo if you're really seriously, if you're in the Americas, on Sunday afternoon. So with the moon in Cancer, it is a time for reflection, a time for considering what you're going to do next, but you don't actually have to do it. So don't feel obliged. And I think that if you do try to interact with other people, particularly on a really sort of close level, you just may feel that something's not there, that something is blocked. And so efforts to get things done, efforts to relate to people may not work. So that's okay. It's only the weekend. Things will change. And then we have on Sunday, to compound things, we've got a square aspect between Sun and Saturn. Sun is your ruler. It's square Saturn. I mean, it is difficult. Things may not work. Things may not move. So if you've got big plans for Sunday, then maybe you should postpone the plans, or you should accept that things are going to be difficult and you're not always going to get the cooperation you feel you deserve. And going back to relationships, Sun is your ruler, it rules Leo. Saturn rules Aquarius, which is your opposite sign. So you've got Sun square Saturn. So that suggests that you and someone else don't quite see eye to eye. William Lilly in Christian Astrology, he compared, and this is writing in the 17th century, he compared squares and oppositions. And I think he said, Squares represent perfect enmity. Oppositions represent perfect hatred. So, okay, it's not an opposition between Sun and Saturn. It's a square. So I think you do need to accept that you and other people are not going to be on the same wavelength. And perhaps you can have a serious discussion with them if you think it's worth the effort. But it might be better just to accept the situation and not try to persuade anyone to do anything, because it's unlikely to work, because you and other people and certain key other people do appear to be on different wavelengths. Now, one final thing I should say is that Mars is moving into Taurus. And this Mars moving into Taurus, okay, you may not feel it over the weekend, but it's a big change. And Taurus, from a Leo view, is a sign which is very high profile. It's often connected with work and career and business, but it can also be about your ego development, the way you are trying to move forward in your life, whatever it is. And so with Mars moving into Taurus, you have a sense that there's something that you need to do. You are going to become ambitious. And it's going to be the kind of ambition that is slow and grinding, slowly wanting things to happen, slowly moving in a particular direction. And you want to take everyone with you, and you're going to be very stubborn about it. And it's important, though, that you're not in a hurry. Remember, this is Mars moving in Taurus, not Mars moving in Aries. Aries moves quickly. Action. Mars moving in Taurus. You have a plan, you decide what you want, and you slowly move towards its achievement. And to begin with, no one's going to know what you're doing. But deep down, you've made your decision, and nothing is going to stop you. Now, that Mars in Taurus, although Mars is in its detriment, Mars doesn't work particularly well in Taurus because it rules Scorpio, and so when it's in the opposite sign of Taurus, it doesn't function particularly effectively. Although Mars may be a bit of a problem in Taurus, I think it can work for you. So you just have to decide what you want. Perhaps your deadline could be July the 20th. July the 20th is when Mars moves out of Taurus into Gemini. So consider what you want to achieve by July the 20th and start work on it. And don't be in a hurry. Virgo, you are actually quite positive and optimistic this weekend. You're starting to see, Virgo, that things really are happening and that there are real possibilities. And this is because Mercury, which is your ruling planet, is conjunct the Venus-Jupiter midpoint. So Venus-Jupiter as a pair are very fortunate and optimistic. Remember, Venus is the lesser benefic, Jupiter is the greater benefic. So with this Venus-Jupiter pair, there is a sense that things can happen, that you can be positive, optimistic, and be lucky. And then you put Mercury on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint, and you can see everything that's possible. So don't doubt yourself, and try to have a busy weekend. And if appropriate, focus on your ambitions. Think about what you'd like to achieve and have some insights. Don't worry too much about small details, thinking, I can't do this because of that. Mercury on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint is going to get you beyond that. Get beyond the details. Try to see the bigger picture. And then, you're really going to be able to see what is possible. And do allow your imagination free rein, because Mercury is not just on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint. Mercury is also making a quintile to Neptune. So quintile is a 72-degree aspect. It's about what we try to create, and it can be about willpower as well. So think about what you are imagining, Virgo. Now, perhaps you're imagining something which sounds crazy. It sounds completely far-fetched. Okay, it may be crazy and far-fetched in its raw form, but maybe you can work on it, and it can become part of this, your general complex of ambitions. Remember, Jupiter is now in Gemini. Jupiter stays in Gemini for the next year. Gemini is an ambition sign from a Virgo perspective. So I think you're going to feel that a lot of things are coming together. You're also going to be aware about some of the things that might be holding you back. And you may feel that the big problem you have to face is the interpersonal dimension. You can see that some people are not being helpful. Maybe not this weekend, or it could well be this weekend, but just some people are just holding you back. And I think this is something that you need to consider, and you need to be honest with yourself. You know, is it your imagination? Sometimes it can be an excuse. You know, we think we can't do something because we think someone else is going to disapprove, or someone else is going to throw a spanner in the works. Maybe we're just saying it. We're just using it as an excuse. That is possible. Another possibility is that someone is appearing to be an obstacle, but actually they're just there to give good advice. You know, we might have plans and ideas, but in themselves may not be entirely practical, and getting constructive advice and even criticism from another person can be helpful, but maybe we don't want that advice and criticism. So that's another manifestation of it, or a possible manifestation. But there is a third possibility, that you're dealing with someone who is just trouble. This person is going to really try to stop you achieving what you want to achieve. And if that is the case, then of course you have to deal with the matter. It may be that you have to put someone in their place, or maybe distance yourself from someone, at least in certain areas. So, for example, if you've got a set of ambitions and someone else seems to be frustrating those ambitions, then don't discuss your ambitions with them. Talk about something else. Talk about everything except what you want to achieve. So you have to work that out. But I think it's a short-term obstacle, and I do think that it's something that you can deal with. Libra. I think it's going to be a somewhat mixed weekend. The problem you have, or the problem you might have, is that Venus, which is your ruler, is square Saturn. And this could be a little bit of an issue. You may feel that something is holding you back, and it might feel that things are really grinding to a halt, especially on Saturday. And you need to work out what it is and what it means. I think that you have a lot of plans, you have ideas, but you're maybe not properly organized. And so organizational issues might be the thing that brings things to a halt. That is one possibility. So I think if possible, you should be as well prepared as possible. Really try to get everything in order. And it's not just about the material environment. It's also about your feelings, because some of your feelings are sort of a little bit all over the place, and there are some things you don't understand, and there's a lot of uncertainty. And if you have these kinds of uncertainty in a situation where there's also a fair amount of garbage around you, it just can bring everything to a halt, and it can encourage you to just ask too many questions, and you're thinking, really, this is just too difficult, I don't want to bother, and in the end, just everything comes to a standstill. So that is a possibility. And I think that you can deal with the situation. You have to be firm with yourself, and you mustn't be overwhelmed by any doubts that you have. And if possible, you need to get some height. By height, I mean if you are at ground level, you can't really see what's going on. If you can metaphorically get some height, you can see the lay of the land, and you can understand where things are going and where things are moving. And that should help you relax more and to be just more aware of what is possible. So don't get overwhelmed by this Venus square Saturn, and perhaps also you need to think about how you can change things. So if things aren't going your way, especially in a social situation, if you just feel that you're being blocked, then what you could do is change everything. And you can change everything through some kind of dramatic initiative. It may be quite literally just standing up and saying, hold on, this isn't right. What you're doing, it's not right. This is not the way to do things. And if you were to do that, you might think you wouldn't want to do it because that sounds a bit embarrassing. But if you actually do that, people will stop and listen. You can change things really quickly if you assert yourself. And that might be another way in which we see this Venus square Saturn. So I talked about Venus square Saturn in quite a negative light, but Saturn is a planet that is connected with authority and structure. And so it may be, Libra, that you can be the authority figure. You can be the one imposing structure. So if you feel that you are being pushed around, you can actually turn the tables and be the one doing the pushing around. And then I don't think you'll have any problems. And I think you're going to be helped as well by a trine between the Moon and Saturn. So Moon is going through Cancer. This is about you out in the world, being seen, being heard. And Moon trine Saturn is about you being seen and heard, and also about you structuring things. And so that really is something that you can do. And don't take other people too seriously. Don't think that they have all the answers. Mars is ruler of Aries. Aries is your opposite sign. And so Mars is semi-sextile Neptune. And so Mars represents the other, another person. And Mars semi-sextile Neptune represents another person who is confused, deceptive, unsure of themselves. So some of the people close to you may not be on very good form. They may not know what they're doing. And perhaps what they need is someone like you to just tell it as it is. And you can kind of nip the problem in the bud. So Libra, it's just really important this weekend that you take an active role, that you don't just accept the situation as it is, because I think it's a time when you really can make things happen, and you shouldn't worry too much if people, say stuff that sounds negative or pessimistic. I think people will, actually. But don't worry about it, because you're bigger than that. So move beyond what people are saying, what people are doing, the frustrations they're trying to present you with, and be the adult in the room. If you're the adult in the room, the weekend's going to be fine. Scorpio, you are somewhat negative this weekend. You do have a rather grim view of the world. I don't know whether that's a good thing. Okay, you might be being realistic. It's always good to be realistic, and right now I think the Scorpios are pretty down to earth, and you can see how things could go wrong, and perhaps you can give people some good advice. But if the advice you give this weekend is going to be fairly negative advice, it's going to be more sort of, don't do this, that's a bad idea, rather than come up with anything really constructive. So you could be a bit of a damper. And so if you're dealing with stuff that isn't really important, just don't be negative for the sake of it. It's just not going to help. And perhaps, Scorpio, what you need is a bit of vision. I say this every now and then with Scorpios, so if you've heard me say this before, forgive me for repeating myself, but I think it does need to be stated that Aleister Crowley, in his Book of Thoth, his book on the tarot pack, he mentioned that there are three faces to Scorpio. There is the scorpion, there is the snake, and there is the eagle. The scorpion, of course, is the self-destructive side of Scorpio. If the story that if you surround a scorpion in a ring of petrol, gasoline, it will sting itself to death. I don't think that's actually true, but that's one aspect of Scorpio. There's the snake, hiding under a rock, not wanting attention. Then you've got the final and most highest aspect of the Scorpio is of course the eagle, and that's perhaps what you really need to tune into this weekend, the eagle. Especially with the moon in Cancer, and the moon in Cancer is from a Scorpio view. Moon in Cancer is all about Cancer as a sign from a Scorpio point of view is all about horizons, wider horizons, looking beyond your immediate environment. Yes, it's easy to be negative. It's easy to criticize things, but you're looking at things from a perspective of the scorpion or the snake. If you look at it from a perspective of the eagle, then you realize that just some things are just not worth bothering with. They're so small in the infinity of things that you don't really need to say anything. And so, Scorpio, I think you really do need to find a sense of vision this weekend. I think that really matters, because once you've got a sense of vision, that will be able to feed into ambition, because you need vision before you think about ambition. There is a slight difference there. And as the weekend draws to a close, you may start to realize that there are things you can actually do next week, and you can start to be very, very positive about it. In fact, if you're in the Americas, it could be as early as Sunday afternoon when you start to get a real sense of what's possible. Now, another thing happening this weekend, which we really do need to focus on, is Mars moving into Taurus. So Taurus is your opposite sign, and often very connected with relationships with other people, and of course Mars is your ruler. And so with Mars moving into Taurus, this represents the beginning of a period of time lasting until I think July the 20th, when there is going to be more focus on other people and the impact that other people have on you. And, I know that many Scorpios like to be independent and make their own decisions. But with Mars moving into Taurus, you just do have to accept that you're not entirely independent, that what people do has an impact on you. And so you have to be flexible, but not too flexible. And I know flexibility is sometimes not easy for Scorpios. It's not about you giving in. It's about you understanding and just opening your heart to what is going on in the world and what other people are thinking and feeling. So do get ready for that, because I think this Mars moving into Taurus could be quite a big deal. And if you're an early Scorpio, for example, born in October, then Mars moving into Taurus could be particularly important, because that could create some real interpersonal aggravation, and it's good to be prepared for it. Nothing is inevitable, but if you're well prepared and you make a special effort to understand people, I think that you will be able to deal with the situation. Finally, I should point out, Scorpio, that Venus is making a square to Saturn this weekend. So Venus is the ruler of Taurus, your opposite sign. So it is connected with relationships. And with Venus square Saturn, you may find that certain people are not themselves. They may just be worrying about things, or there just may be something bothering them. And you need to take that into account, and don't just judge people straight away, just by make assumptions about someone because of what they say or what they do. There may be something going through their mind, something going on in their life which is distracting them, and so be a little bit tolerant and do show some understanding, because a bit of understanding can go a long way. Sagittarius, you're feeling that things could be better, I think. I think that because Sagittarius, there are some fairly deep thoughts going on, and you're really thinking about perhaps the world in general. Yesterday when I was talking to Sagittarius, talking to you, I sort of talked about the Cassandra myth, that Sagittarians at the moment, they can see the way things are, and they can see the way things are moving. And I'm talking more about society rather than your immediate environment, but you can see that things are getting bad, and at the same time people aren't ready to listen to you. And that's Cassandra. Cassandra is the prophetess, the Trojan prophetess, and no one listened to her. And so that is unfortunate. But I suppose the thing is that people don't want to listen to bad news. I don't know why. Is it a generational thing? And so what do? Well, you could just accept the situation and be positive. It may be really difficult being positive, but actually you can do it. Now, the reason you can do it is because Jupiter is on the Mercury-Uranus midpoint. Jupiter is conjunct the the pair Mercury-Uranus is about exciting news. It's about excitement, surprises. And so with Jupiter on Mercury-Uranus midpoint, you have the capacity to make people sit up and listen, but in a positive sense. So I understand that you know or feel that things are going from bad to worse, but at the same time, you can start to see good things that are going to happen. You know, you can see possibilities for growth and advancement, and you can feel them. Okay, you may feel that that they are nothing compared with how difficult the world really is. But just focus on the positive and give people positive news. Just make the effort. You can do it, and you will find that people respond extremely well to you by just being positive. Give people what they want. I know we shouldn't give people what they want, but do it. And I think you'll be very surprised by the reaction. And I think it's going to be a good way to get people's trust. Aside from other people, I think that at the moment, Sagittarius, you have some really good ideas. You're bursting with ideas. Not all of these ideas have to be communicated. Some of these ideas you're going to want to keep to yourself. You want the space to be able to work on them, and that is something that you really are going to be able to do. So really focus on that as well. And also going back to other people and relationships, it's quite a good situation because Jupiter is conjunct the Mercury-Uranus midpoint, and Mercury is conjunct the Venus-Jupiter midpoint. And of course, Mercury is ruler of Gemini, which is your opposite sign. And so with Mercury conjunct the Venus-Jupiter midpoint, there are people out there who are really optimistic. They want, they're also quite lucky. And of course, if you're dealing with optimistic people, you don't want to throw cold water in their face. So give optimistic people what they want, and they will feed optimism back to you, and there will be a great atmosphere of trust and togetherness. So overall, Sagittarius, I know there's a lot of negativity there. You do feel that things are difficult. And in fact, I think you actually you will quite enjoy telling people how bad things are. But you've got to put that to one side. Focus on the positive, give other people what they want, and yes, I think it can be a great weekend. Capricorn, are you the problem or are you the solution? I think that is a real issue this weekend. The reason being, it's connected with Saturn. So what we have this weekend is that we have square aspects between the Sun and Saturn and Venus and Saturn. So on Saturday, we've got a Venus-Saturn square. On Sunday, we have got a Sun-Saturn square. And so Saturn is you. Saturn is your ruler. And that means that you can put a stop to things. Things can just be stopped dead by Capricorn. And that might be a good thing. Capricorn sees that something is wrong, and Saturn says, no, you can't do that. You need to do something else. You need to think about it. So in that sense, you could say that you are the solution, because people are getting things wrong, people are being irresponsible, and yeah, you can bring it all to a halt. And whoever the people are, they will listen to you. Okay, one might think as it's a weekend, it might be family members, but it might be other people. And so you can create real structure. So that could be the solution to the problem. But the problem might be you. Saturn, being you, might be overcautious and too quick to criticize. And just because you've got the ability to bring something to a halt doesn't mean that you should exercise that. You need to consider the situation. Is it really worth spoiling something, or maybe disappointing someone, or telling someone they've got it wrong? Is it really worth it? Do you really need to do it? So do consider that, and try to be sensitive, because this weekend, you've got the moon in Cancer. Moon in Cancer is it's Cancer is your opposite sign, and so with moon in Cancer, you should make a real effort to listen to other people, to try to understand what people are thinking and feeling and where their limits are. And then you can decide whether it's really appropriate to be negative. Negativity could cause a lot of damage and may not be helpful. So it goes back to that question: are you the problem or the solution? You need to be the solution. You don't want to be the problem. You don't want to be someone who people think, you're just bringing everything to a halt. You're spoiling the weekend. You could spoil the weekend for people, let's be honest. I think that really is possible. But it's not necessary. And with the moon in Cancer, you certainly have the sensitivity to prevent yourself from causing too many issues and problems. But maybe, Capricorn, you should be thinking about yourself and what you could and should be doing. Because Mars is changing sign. On Sunday, Mars moves from Aries to Taurus. Now, Mars is a planet that actually has quite a strong connection with Capricorn. Now, I always say that Saturn rules Capricorn. But Mars is exalted in Capricorn. And that means that there is a special link between Mars and Capricorn. It's almost a co-ruler through exaltation, Mars is. And with Mars moving from Aries to Taurus, I do think that is going to be a good thing, because for the last 6 weeks or so, Mars has been in Aries, and from your perspective, that's very much been about putting a lot of energy into your home and your domestic life and into your family, and it just may have become just too much of a good thing. And with Mars moving into Taurus, you can start to move your energy into a different direction, thinking not just about yourself and your foundations, but about what you can do in a constructive way. It's about building things, Mars in Taurus. It's about being constructive about your creative abilities. And so perhaps with Mars in Taurus, think about what you can achieve in a positive sense. Don't worry about other people, what they're doing and what they're not doing. Don't put energy into criticism. Maybe over the next 6 weeks, if you want to criticize something, criticize yourself in a constructive way, and ask yourself, what is this thing that you can do, that the universe is expecting you to do, but you're not doing? What's holding you up? And with Mars moving through Taurus, you can start to tune into this thing that you're supposed to be doing, that is in a way quite magnificent, and it's certainly very creative. And between now and mid to late July, I think that you can really create something very special. Aquarius, you have to be a bit careful in terms of relationships, because This weekend there is a square between the Sun and Saturn. So Saturn is ruler of Aquarius, the Sun is ruler of Leo. So if you've got a square between Sun and Saturn, you get the image of you and someone else who don't get on. So do consider that you and someone else don't see eye to eye. You might have a disagreement about some quite fundamental issue, and you have to ask, do you just try to work it through, or do you just leave it until the situation has cleared? I suppose you have to make up your mind on this matter, but one way or the other. I'm not telling you for sure which way to go, but of course it's usually best to get things out of the way. So what kind of problems might we be dealing with? I think at the moment Aquarians are quite focused on money. I mean, they have been for a long time because Saturn's been in Pisces. Saturn has been in Pisces since March of 2023. And so with Saturn being in Pisces, Aquarians have perhaps been more concerned than usual about money. And with Sun square Saturn, that might indicate that you and someone else have a disagreement about what should be done with money and how money should be spent, or whether it should not be spent. So yeah, perhaps there is a financial issue that needs to be worked through, and you're not going to come to a comfortable agreement, but what you should perhaps be striving for is you and someone else understanding each other's point of view. Even if it's a disagreement that's not about money, that's what you should be striving for. Understanding someone else's point of view and making sure that the other person understands your point of view, you understanding their point of view. So there is perhaps a little bit of work to be done in that department. Additionally, the moon is making a trine to Saturn, and that moon trine Saturn is probably all part of the same issue, but it's a trine. Moon trine Saturn creates a possibility of finding connections. Even when you're dealing with someone who you disagree with, moon trine Saturn allows you to get to grips with the details and maybe to be constructive. And I think you can be constructive, and I think you can encourage other people to be constructive. And maybe you and others need to focus on a single task, a task where there is some agreement. And with that agreement, then I think you can make good progress. But just focus on one thing at a time, and try not to overwhelm yourself. And Saturn does keep coming up. It's not just that the Sun is square Saturn. Venus is square Saturn. And Venus square Saturn is emotionally uncomfortable. You are quite capable of closing people down emotionally. Aquarius has a reputation for being quite a detached, unemotional sign. Of course, it's a bit of an exaggeration, that reputation, but still it's there. And with Venus square Saturn, you're capable of grinding people to a halt. Someone might be having a good day, and then they meet you, and it just comes to an end. It may be something you say, and you just can't help yourself. But be careful what you say. Is it really necessary? So try to focus very much on how you are occurring to other people. Think about, in particular, your words and how you respond to what other people say. Someone might say something to you, expecting you to say something enthusiastic and positive, and you just say something the opposite, and it just brings everything to a halt. So really, Aquarius, that is something that you need to consider. It's very similar to what I was saying to Capricorn. I was saying to Capricorn, are you the problem, and are you a problem, or are you the solution? I think I'm saying something similar to you, because very often Saturn and Aquarius and Capricorn are moving in the same direction. That's because both signs have Saturn as their ruler. So Aquarius, just really try to consider how you're impacting other people. One other point, in terms of diet, I would perhaps be careful what you eat. Just don't eat anything new. Just be fairly conservative in terms of what you are consuming. If you eat something that you've never eaten before, there could be problems. So diet and nutrition may need a little bit of attention. But remember, this is not medical advice. This is an astrology video. It's for entertainment purposes only. But I thought I'd throw that in at the end. Pisces. There is a certain sense of excitement this weekend. You feel that things can happen. And Pisces, you're having lots of good ideas. They're just coming from nowhere. And you believe that many different things are possible. So it's important that you are able to communicate this. I think that's what the world needs as well, because this weekend we've got these two rather difficult aspects. We've got Sun square Saturn, Venus square Saturn. So a lot of people, I think, are feeling a little bit down in the dumps. There is a certain negativity around. And so what's needed is someone to change the narrative, as they say. And you might be the person to do it. It's because Jupiter, which is your ruler, is on the Mercury-Uranus midpoint. Jupiter is conjunct the Mercury-Uranus midpoint. So Mercury-Uranus is about news. It's about good ideas. It's about things happening out of the blue. And maybe you're the person to make things happen. You can get people to change. So if you're dealing with people who seem a bit negative, who seem that they seem down in the dumps, they don't know what to do, you're the person that can create the spark. You might not actually feel like it, but you can do it. And I suppose that means that you've got to use your sensitivity. I think that as a Pisces, you have a good understanding about what's going on in the world and why people might be feeling negative about things. But somehow you're not part of the negativity. It's not directly impacting you. So you can distance yourself from it, you can observe it, and then that gives you the opportunity to actually change it. And so it's through your interventions that you can really make things happen. And I think that people will appreciate it. So always ask yourself, what can you do to make things better? And it just might be a couple of words. A couple of words, if they're said with laser beam precision at the right time, can just change everything. Now, that doesn't mean to say, though, that you are irresponsible. Far from it. I think in many respects you are, of all the 12 signs, you are the most responsible. You understand what's important, and you've got, remember, Saturn is moving through Pisces. Saturn has been moving through Pisces for well over a year. And so there is, with you, Pisces, a fundamental sense of what needs to be done, and your sense of purpose will be very obvious. And in terms of your family and whatever's going on in your home, you are in a position to provide a fair amount of structure and leadership, which I think will be very much appreciated. And you may also have to initiate. By that I mean that it's important that people do something. I mean, one reason that some people might be feeling a bit negative is because they're not doing anything. And I think you understand that. And so you've got to encourage people to do things. And it could be something very simple, like going for a walk, doing something that's a little bit active. You don't necessarily have to, go out for a sort of massive excursion or go to a party. It's not necessarily like that. In fact, it shouldn't be like that. That's not the way it works. It's about encouraging people to do something which is relevant to themselves. So it's not just enough to tell someone to do anything. You need to think about what would that person enjoy doing? What would that person really appreciate doing? And so you can use a bit of imagination, and then you can say, well, let's do this. And don't give someone too much choice. Just let it happen quickly. And so in that sense, Pisces, you're the person that everyone needs. And you will at the same time be completely down to earth. There won't be anything flaky about you. Your ideas might seem very optimistic, but they won't be crazy. They are going to be grounded. And so, Pisces, you could argue that you've got a certain amount of responsibility this weekend. And I just feel that you're up to it. I think that the universe has put you here this weekend for a purpose. And so I suppose it's time to sort of live up to your responsibilities. And you won't be sorry. And I think you will be rewarded. And that is it for the 12 signs. And what I want to do is look at this weekend from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is the weekend going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 25, which is innocence. We shouldn't expect anything. Expectation can be a real killer. It can prevent anything from happening. We ask too many questions, we prod, we dig, and as a result, nothing happens. So we need to have no preconceived notions about what might happen this weekend. And it's very important not to be pushy. If we ask for something and we're spoiling it. So, those that ask don't get. Those that don't ask don't want. But again, it's not about having expectations. And also that is the key to magic, isn't it? The magical moment is when you give up. When you believe there's any hope of getting something, nothing happens. But it's just when you absolutely give up. Wasn't that that film Trading Places? Wasn't there? I don't know. One of the characters, the magic moment was when he was about to shoot himself. The moment. I'm not advocating anyone shoots himself, but just that moment when that's that moment when you've completely given up, and that is when the magic happens. And so if you feel that there's something that just is not happening, you really want it to happen, then maybe you've just got a little too much hope. Just drive out that last hope, and then that's when things can start happening. But in a general sense, it's not a time to be pushy this weekend. Trying to push your agenda. The I Ching also says that in talking about officialdom in ancient China, that those that are looking for high office should not strive for it. And I suppose that applies to how you're dealing with other people. If other people are really keen to get something or want something, then it shouldn't be given to them. The people who should be given things are the people who are not striving for it, who are being humble and who are just happy with the way they are happy with the way things are, without worrying too much about the future and preferment. And the I Ching is also saying, it's suggesting that some of us may feel that we have recently lost something. We've lost an opportunity, or something has been taken from us, and that may be bothering us. It's something which was ours and was taken from us. And this relates to the fact that the fourth line is moving. And the Wilhelm translation of the I Ching advises us that if something really, really belongs to us, it can't be taken away from us. So if we are worried that we've lost something, we shouldn't worry. Because if it's really ours, it cannot be taken away from us. Now, this hexagram, because the fourth line from the bottom is moving, it switches to a second hexagram. And strangely, it is the same second hexagram that we had yesterday, or on Friday. And that was hexagram 42, increase. And it does seem that, we didn't have any expectations. And as we don't have any expectations, things start moving in our favour. And we start to increase, perhaps in terms of our knowledge, in our experience. Could be a financial increase. That is possible. It might also be about how we relate to other people, because the Wilhelm, I think it was the Wilhelm translation says that we can imitate the good in others, and we can sacrifice or remove the bad in ourselves. So if we've got things about ourselves and our attitudes that are not doing us any good, we can remove them. If we see things in other people that we admire, then we can bring them into ourselves. We can imitate it, and in that sense, we increase ourselves. So, in general, this weekend looks pretty good. It seems that we don't have any expectations, particularly on Saturday. Just let's see what happens. No ambition. We're not striving for anything. And then with that sense of emptiness, we can start moving forward, and things start coming our way. People start coming our way, opportunities coming our way, and also in terms of our basic character. And that's probably what really matters. This is I Ching. It doesn't like it when people are too obsessed about money. So by building on our character, by imitating what is good, by rejecting what is not good in ourselves, then we can become better people this weekend. And now I want to consider Mars in Taurus. So on Sunday, Mars moves into Taurus, and it is a big change. And Mars was in Aries, and Mars works very well in Aries. Mars rules Aries, and so you would think that when Mars moves into Taurus, it's not so good, because Mars doesn't really work very well in Taurus. I mean, if you think about it logically, that makes absolute sense, because Mars is a fast-moving, quite aggressive planet. It likes space. It likes action, And when it moves into Taurus, Taurus is a slow sign. It's a fixed sign. How can Mars really operate in Taurus? It's tough, and things are slow, and in general, yeah, it's in its detriment. So if I'm negative about Mars in Taurus, which I might be a little bit, just remember that I have Mars in Taurus. So I'm not saying anything about Mars in Taurus that I'm perhaps not experiencing myself. And so, people with Mars in Taurus can be frustrated perhaps, but they can be very, very focused. I mean, that is a good thing about Mars in Taurus. Once they decide they want something, they will do everything they can to get it. Okay, it can be a good thing, but actually it can be a dreadful thing if people want things that really are bad. And I think we will see this when looking at certain people who do have Mars in Taurus. So anyway, let's look at some famous people or infamous people who do have this placement. So I'm actually going to start off not with a person. I'm going to start off with my dog. I've talked about my dog. You sometimes hear my dog. My dog has Mars in Taurus. My dog has Mars in Taurus conjunct Uranus and Moon in Scorpio. So animals can be impacted by Mars in Taurus. And my dog is completely and utterly stubborn. When she wants something, she will be focused on it. She will get it. It's really difficult to get through to this dog. She's I would have said almost entirely untrainable. I mean, she's not an unpleasant dog, as I've said, but incredibly stubborn. Okay, her breed is stubborn, the Slovensky Chuvach, which is similar to a Great Pyrenees. So it's a stubborn breed who likes to make executive decisions, and but with Mars in Taurus, she is extra stubborn, and she will insist on eating everything. She's going to be 2 in August, but still, she will not change. So that's one way in which Mars in Taurus can work. And of course, I've got Mars in Taurus. You've seen enough of my chart, so I'm not going to put up my chart again. So looking at some people who have Mars in Taurus, someone who has recently been in the news was the district attorney of New York, who was Alvin Bragg. So he was the one who has been going after Donald Trump for this in the hush money trial. You could say he's been very persistent about it, and there it is. He's got Mars in Taurus. So I suppose if you're a lawyer and a district attorney is very obsessed about going after someone, you will just keep going until you get your way. And so I suppose he's got his way. He's got his conviction of Donald Trump. But I suppose in his case, that Mars in Taurus, he's got the idea, let's get Donald Trump. But is he ever thinking about the consequences of it? I don't know. Mars in Taurus is just, once it's made up its mind, it just keeps going. So another person with Mars in Taurus, looking at things from a sort of rather negative perspective, would be Jimmy Savile. So Jimmy Savile was a television personality in the UK, and he was completely disgraced after his death. His sexual antics and his abuse of people and his abuse of power was absolutely shocking to the British establishment. He was seen as this really nice person, supposedly did a lot of work for charity. and he had Mars in Taurus, Sun opposition. There he has Sun opposition Mars. So Sun in Scorpio, Mars in Taurus. Now, you could say, this is, Mars in Taurus at its absolute worst. You could say, well, you would have thought that someone would have some sense of control in terms of dealing with their sexual desire, and he needs a television personality. But Mars in Taurus has decided that this is what he's going to do, and he's just going to carry on like that regardless. So Mars in Taurus could be a persistent pattern of behavior. So I suppose from a criminal justice perspective, I suppose one often thinks about whether people can be rehabilitated. And you could say maybe that someone who's got Mars in Taurus can't be rehabilitated. I mean, that's a complete generalization. 1 in 12 people have Mars in Taurus. But with Mars in Taurus, there is a persistent pattern of behavior, which may be very difficult to break. Now, one aspect of Mars in Taurus which I want to look at is the violence. There are some very violent people who have Mars in Taurus, and I think you can associate it perhaps with assassins and an assassination. Of course, sometimes assassination is something that is necessary. It's not in all cases is assassination a bad thing. So, for example, here is the horoscope of a Czech called Jan Kubiš, and so he assassinated Reinhard Heydrich in Prague, and so Reinhard Heydrich was basically running the Czech lands, and he was a monster, and he was completely brutal, and the Czech resistance government in London hatched this plan to assassinate Heydrich, and they sent 2 people to do the assassination. One was Slovak, the other was Gabčík, and the other man was Kubiš. And Jan Kubiš was on this hairpin bend in Prague, and the first attempt to assassinate Heydrich failed because Gabčík tried to shoot at Heydrich's Mercedes with a machine gun, but the machine gun jammed. So Kubiš stepped in. He didn't run away. He stepped in and threw a bomb into Heydrich's car, and the bomb blew up, and horsehair got fired into Heydrich's body, and he died in the end. Died of blood poisoning. And so, looking at Kubiš's chart, we're looking at the chart of an assassin, and of course, in this sense, he was justified in what he was doing. He was assassinating someone who deserved to be assassinated. And so here he had Mars in Taurus square Uranus. So Mars is about aggression, and it's persistent. I mean, they had been parachuted into Czechoslovakia for a long time before the assassination. So there was this persistence. They just carried on, and they just stayed there, and they got their moment. And then Mars square Uranus, that's when his life, reached its peak. That was what he was there for. That's when he threw the bomb, Mars square Uranus, and as a result of that bomb, he achieved his mission. So when Mars in Taurus decides it wants to do something, Mars in Taurus will go and do it. So another example would be Timothy McVeigh, who was responsible for the Oklahoma bombing in the mid-90s, when hundreds of people were killed, I think, in his truck bombing. He was upset about the government and people taking away people's guns, and he got upset after the Waco siege. And yeah, Timothy McVeigh had Mars at 19 Taurus, and Mars trine Pluto at so really persistent. Of course, he was a Taurus as well. When Taurus says they're going to do something, they usually just go ahead and do it. There's something very persistent about that. And so Mars is about his aggression, his anger, and he just goes and does it. So that might be a way in which Mars in Taurus can work. Another terrorist or leader of a sort of terrorist organization with Mars in Taurus, Osama bin Laden. Other people would theorize about terrorism, but he with Mars in Taurus conjunct Algol. Notice he's got Mars square Pluto. Mars in Taurus will go ahead and do it. And I know that there's always arguments about who brought down the World Trade Center. I don't want to upset anyone by suggesting that Al-Qaeda brought down the World Trade Center. That's what I personally think. I mean, I'm completely naive, but I just follow the mainstream narrative on this. But that would fit with Mars in Taurus. Mars in Taurus has an idea, has this crazy idea, very horrible, violent idea, and executes it. And you think about all the preparation that went into the destruction of the World Trade Center, flying a plane into it, assuming you believe the account of mainstream media, which I do, I'm afraid. But Mars square Pluto, he just goes and does it slowly, because it's Mars in Taurus. You're going to get them. You're going to get America. You're going to do it. And so that is Taurus, just having that almost demonic persistence in order to get your way. So that's him. Another assassin who had Mars in Taurus was John Wilkes Booth. I don't know his time of birth, but John Wilkes Booth was the person who assassinated Lincoln. And again, Mars in Taurus. Okay, he had Sun in Taurus, like Timothy McVeigh, but Mars in Taurus is very persistent. Something upsets him, and so Mars in Taurus will do everything required in order to achieve his aim. If you don't like something, something upsets you, you put the plan into action and you go and do it. I mean, you could say the same thing. I'm not sure going to put up his chart, but, like with Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler had Mars in Taurus. He had these crazy ideas. He put them down in Mein Kampf. He was a ranting crazy person until he wasn't. Apparently that was the case. Up until the end of the First World War, 1919, he was ranting. Up until 1919, he had these crazy ideas. People thought he was crazy. And then suddenly, things changed. The environment changed in Germany. And people started to listen to him. And, if you want to understand what Hitler was going to do, what Hitler's war plans are going to do, you look at Mein Kampf. He wrote it all down. That's Mars in Taurus. They say what they're going to do, and then they go and do it. And people get surprised when they go and do it. And that's Mars in Taurus. Now, a couple of people who were born on the same day. I looked at this. Was it about? In March I looked at it. There are these two people born on the same day, very different. One of them was a librarian called Clara Breed. I've looked at her chart before. She was born on March the 19th, 1906, and she had Mars in Taurus. And so this is a positive expression of Mars in Taurus. Mars in Taurus can get really upset about things. This is not right. There can be a sense of justice with Mars in Taurus. And if something is not right, you want to do something about it, and you are very persistent in doing something about it. Now, what she thought was not right was something that also happened with Mars in Taurus. So what upset her was Executive Order 9066 on February the 19th, 1942, which took place when Mars was in Taurus conjunct Saturn. So a Mars in Taurus event upset Clara Breed. So what Executive Order 9066 was about the internment of the Japanese. They were considered to be a threat, even though they were American citizens. And so this event really triggered Clara Breed, and she wrote letters, even though she was, but you would have thought at the time of war, someone who's a librarian could get into real trouble during war, standing up against the government. Yeah, it's a dangerous thing to do. But she did it. She didn't come to any harm. She kept her job as a librarian, but she put a lot of effort into campaigning against the executive order. She also, I think, sent food parcels to Japanese who were interned. So that might be a positive way in which Mars in Taurus is working. Now, Clara Breed, who was very much associated with internment and the issues of internment and trying to fight against internment. She was born on March the 19th, 1906. And also born on March the 19th, 1906 was Adolf Eichmann, one of the people responsible for the Holocaust, who's, I suppose, unfortunately, his work was involved with internment, but in a very different way, very persistently pursuing the Holocaust. He was involved in transportation, and he carried on. Mars in Taurus, remember, there's his Mars in Taurus at 1 degrees 39. He carried on with his job, even right at the end, 1945, as Germany was losing the war. He just carried on, in terms of getting involved in the deportation of the Hungarian Jews. Mars in Taurus just carried on. So again, that falls back to the negative side of Mars in Taurus. Remember, born on the same day as Clara Breed. Now, what is interesting about Adolf Eichmann and his Mars in Taurus is that he was hanged on June the 1st, 1966. There's his Mars at 1 degree 39 Taurus. He was hanged on June the 1st, 1962. And Mars was at 2 degrees Taurus. So he was hanged on his Mars return, which kind of fits. And I suppose Mars in Taurus is the neck. And I suppose if you look at it from a perspective of the Israeli government who hanged him, Mars in Taurus, this is something we are going to do. Mars in Taurus, it's going to happen. We are going to be very persistent. And people with Mars in Taurus can hang around for a long time. Forgive, hang around, yes. They can hang around for a long time. And turning to the United States and figures in American politics, Mitch McConnell, leader of Republicans in the Senate, he's got a Mars-Saturn conjunction in Taurus. And that Mars-Saturn conjunction seems a bit grim, but it's also very persistent. He just keeps going. He just doesn't go away. I think he's finally going away now because his health is declining. But Mars in Taurus and he's old, but he's still, I think, leader of the Republicans in the Senate. So there is that persistence with Mars in Taurus, and also the persistence in terms of the ideological agenda. For example, Mitch McConnell was really persistent in terms of making sure that the Supreme Court was stacked in the Republicans' favor. I can't remember what was the name of the judge. There was Obama right at the end. When Obama wanted to appoint a Supreme Court judge after the Democrats had lost that election, in the dying embers of the Obama regime. Obama was desperate to try to appoint a liberal Supreme Court judge, but was it Merrick Garland? But Mitch McConnell just kept blocking it, refused to give way. And then Trump got elected and Mitch McConnell got his way and Trump chose someone else, chose a conservative justice. So that's an example of the complete persistence of Mars in Taurus. And Nancy Pelosi has Mars in Taurus. So where's Mars? I can't find Nancy Pelosi. There she is. So Nancy Pelosi has Mars conjunct Algol on in Taurus. I suppose critics of Mars of Nancy Pelosi would kind of quite like that image. The Gorgon, Medusa, Mars on Algol. She is persistent, and again, she's she's leader of the Democrats in the House of Representatives, I think. And you know, she's born in 1940, so she's 84, yet she just keeps going on. And there you have Mars in Taurus on the midheaven, just keeps pushing forward with an agenda, I suppose, a liberal agenda, a progressive agenda. So you could see that Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi seem to be responding to their Mars in Tauruses in very similar ways. Additionally, we've got Alex Jones of InfoWars fame, who has, of course, had huge lawsuit, huge damages awarded against him as a result of the after the comments he made after the Sandy Hook killings in 2012. He dug down. I think that was a problem. He made an allegation about the Sandy Hook killings and trying to suggest they didn't happen, and which seemed to me a bit absurd. But he didn't stop. See, that can be Mars in Taurus. Mars in Taurus doesn't know when to stop, and of course, in Alex Jones's case, Mars is square Jupiter. So Mars and Jupiter just keeps going, and doesn't know when to stop, and that can be a problem. So I think his Mars in Taurus, it does make him stubborn, it does make him persistent, but in the process, it can actually cause a lot of damage. Finally, there is someone that comes up rather a lot. Klaus Schwab. Don't know his time of birth, but remember, Klaus Schwab is the man who founded the World Economic Forum. And Klaus Schwab has Mars in Taurus, conjunct Uranus. So Mars in Taurus is about persistence, but it's also about the persistence in the service of a vision. So you have a vision. He has this globalist vision, and he wants to do everything he can to put this vision into practice. So he sets up the World Economic Forum, and I think the first meeting was in 1971, and he just keeps going with it, keeps pushing this vision that national governments need to do what's right. They shouldn't, perhaps they shouldn't worry too much about public pressure, and there can be somehow a meeting of people that know best, that this elitist vision can be brought to bear. And so that's how his Mars in Taurus seems to be working. I don't think you'd look at his chart and say, oh, that's a chart of a globalist, particularly as we don't know his time of birth, but he has Mars conjunct Uranus. I suppose you could say it is working in quite a positive way for him and his agenda. Remember, Mars and Taurus is often about having an agenda. And Mars Uranus is about having a disruptive agenda. It's almost quite a revolutionary agenda, thinking about going beyond the nation state. And so you could say that, Klaus Schwab is an example of someone who used his Mars in Taurus very well. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about Mars in Taurus. I hope you found it all, what I said, was of some interest. If you enjoyed this video, I would be very grateful if you were to like it. If you enjoyed the video and you're not subscribed, of course, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you again very soon.